Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Two Stewards Show. My name's Mark, and I'm here with Brent.
You got to hold the show. Yeah.
Okay. It's like at a monster truck rally.
I've never been to one of those.
Good stewards. Okay, we'll work on the intro, folks.
Yeah.
But anyways, welcome back. This episode, we are going to talk a little bit more about Bitcoin. We're still sort of working through our introduction to Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin? How does it work? Brent, should you invest in Bitcoin?
We're still trying to learn what it is ourselves. Should you invest in Bitcoin? Well, are we even allowed to make financial advice on this podcast?
No. So yeah,
we need first a big disclaimer.
Yeah, the disclaimer.
Before we say anything.
Entertainment purposes only. And what else do they say?
I don't know. That's all we're good for anyways.
Yeah, pretty much. It's an entertainment podcast, folks. And we have some opinions that we like to express from time to time.
So should you invest in Bitcoin? And that's kind of a tricky question because when I think about Bitcoin, I think that Bitcoin is money. Like it has a lot of the properties that we've talked about in the past on this podcast that good money has, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so, that's essentially the argument, right?
What, for Bitcoin?
That Bitcoin is sound money.
Yeah. So that's kind of our premise. And when I think about the question, like, can you invest in Bitcoin? Essentially what you're saying is, can you invest in money? Mm-hmm. Or like, I guess you could say currency. Like if you think about it, can you invest in the Canadian dollar? If you kind of draw a similar comparison from Bitcoin as money to maybe the Canadian dollar as fiat money, can you invest in the Canadian dollar?
You can. I mean, people do Forex trading, right? Foreign exchange stuff, but that's like pretty specialized.
That's like a currency arbitrage.
Yeah. And typically you're not doing it with like $1,000, right? Because there's just like the fees would kill you. There's no point in doing that, right? You're doing millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And you've got the spread between this currency and that currency, and you sell it at this time. You know, you have to buy it at the right time, sell it, like highly specialized.
As an investment, like when I think about the word invest, what you're saying is I'm committing to something with the expectation of a future return or a future result that's going to be improved, right? So if I'm going to commit my resources, my time, my energy, my money to some investment, like some endeavor, whether it's like a business or a piece of real estate or some asset or something, I'm going to expect a future return. And when you buy money, you really don't expect a future there's nothing productive about it, right?
No, unless you're doing that highly specialized thing, which most people don't. So we can exclude that.
Yeah, like the Forex kind of thing you mentioned. I think what you're doing there is you're transacting between different currencies and taking the benefit of that. So what you're essentially doing is kind of creating this active role as a Forex trader, right? Yeah. Where you buy one thing and then you will sell it for the other one when the values.
Yeah, but you're not doing like a long-term hold.
No.
Generally speaking, right? I know some people like...
We should do that. I'll put my money in Bitcoin for the next 30 years and you put your money in the Canadian dollar and then we'll see. And you're not allowed to do anything with it. You just got to hold it in your bank account.
On a country level, some countries do this, right? They'll just hold US dollars. But that's not...
What countries?
Well, like China has done it for a long time. I'm not just talking about bonds, but actual dollars, right?
Right.
Like many countries have
held
US
so what's
dollars.
The logic there? Like
it's generally not an investment. It would be more of a hedge against their own dollar, against other things going on in the world. I just want to point that out. Like people do hold dollars.
Yeah.
But again, usually you wouldn't have US dollars as an investment.
It's not like they're, okay.
Yeah, like if you look up what's an investment, that's the process, dictionary definition, the action or process of investing money for profit or material result. So you're expecting something at some point from it and not just like it's a hedge against, well, our dollar's going down or our economy is weakening. So we're going to hold a whole bunch of US dollars, right? China did this for a long time, and many countries have now dumped their US dollar. But that's more on a macro level. And when we're talking about individual investors, it's not something that people do.
Yeah,
so you don't invest in money.
Yeah, so our premise is that Bitcoin is money. So I don't know, maybe we want to try to get into like the basics of Bitcoin itself, the mechanics of, okay, what actually is it? Because when we talk about gold or salt or seashells or cattle and all these other archaic monies, I think people can get a pretty good idea in their head, like, okay, gold, I've seen, a big gold bar under my bed. I know what that looks like, but Bitcoin is intangible and is digital. So it's like internet native, right? We had Jesse Berger on, we talked about internet native money. So I don't think people in their head know, okay, like Bitcoin is this. So how can we start talking about this in a way that people understand?
So I think we've established that the money system we have now is not sound. We don't have sound money. Our dollars are not sound. And we don't need to go through all of that again, but through monetary policy, inflation, etc. And hopefully we've established that Bitcoin is sound money, but not, I wouldn't call it an investment. Right?
But then what is it? So I guess one way to look at it is, I think Jesse helped us with this too, about Bitcoin's monetary policy, but Bitcoin came out at a certain point in history, right? Like 15 years ago.
Great financial crisis.
Some guy comes up with Bitcoin. Like, it's an invention. So in a sense, it's an invention. Also, in a sense, it's a discovery, because he kind of discovered a way to have decentralized money. And it's interesting because he put out this white paper. So I don't know how many white papers you read, Mark. Usually
the only white paper I have is in my bathroom.
That's not the kind of white paper we're talking about.
Okay. Well, what's a white paper? A white paper is like a technical...
it's like an academic article kind
description of something, right?
So it starts with an abstract, right? Like a summary of what the thesis is that this person's putting forward, this researcher's academic. And then you go through kind of the solution that you're proposing. And so it's interesting, like if you've never read it, the Bitcoin white paper, I think it's an interesting thing to read if you're into this podcast. I guess if you're into monetary technology and you want to understand Bitcoin a little bit more to know, okay, why is it going up in price? Like, why is it not seem to go down to zero? Right? Like, what exactly is the deal with this? If you read through it, it kind of points to the problems that existed before Bitcoin came out, and the problems that it kind of solved, and then why it works the way it does. And I almost liken like the Bitcoin white paper to maybe the U.S. Constitution, right? So before the U.S. Started, its cool new way of governing people, they have an idea, right? And they write this down in a constitution, and that kind of governs the way the government works. Right? And they always hear in the news, like, oh, this guy interprets the Constitution in a different way. And if you look at kind of the original Constitution versus the current Constitution, like you think it should be the same, but it always kind of ends up having additional things added to it or some change, right? And whenever you try and change a Constitution, it's like this big thing. So with Bitcoin, what's interesting is that the Constitution's put out, and changes like can happen, but the way that in which they happen is very closely governed, and it's like this decentralized mathematical way that changes can happen. I don't know. This is super deep and whatever, but it's really fascinating. Mark's like, whatever, man. I just get so excited. Maybe I'm getting a little bit in the weeds. What do you think?
Yeah, well, hey, weeds are okay sometimes. But it is interesting that there is a document. You can call it the Constitution of Bitcoin, I guess. Which is the white paper, and it like delineates all the rules and how it works.
It's really that simple, right? It's like, hey, this is my idea. It's a peer-to-peer version of electronic money. It allows payments to go from one party to the other, like, right, peer-to-peer. So you send it, and the other guy gets it. You don't have to go through a trusted third party or a financial institution, right? And that was one of the main premises behind why they wanted to make this currency, right? The dollar system's failing. We don't trust the banks or the governments, whatever. We want to go peer to peer.
Yeah.
And like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. How do we do that electronically? So this is their proposal, right? It's just, hey, this is what we want. Like, do you guys want to use it? And yeah, turns out a lot of people want to use it. And they're willing to pay 60,000 or whatever it is in Canadian dollars right now for one.
Yeah. Well, and it's important to remember that this came about as a lot of discoveries do, in response to something.
Right.
Right? People typically don't invent or discover something if there's not something pushing them to do it. Right? Like maybe you're Isaac Newton and an apple falls on your head and you discover gravity, if you kind of believe that version of the story, right? But usually like wartime is when many inventions and discoveries happen because people are looking for a better way to kill
things up.
Yeah, better way to kill people or blow stuff up, or in response to something that somebody else figured out, right? Like, oh, they got these bigger, better walls, and like, oh, we've invented cannon.
Yeah.
We can blow those walls down, and like all of a sudden city walls didn't matter anymore. But anyways, just it came about as a response to a problem. And so that's one thing we got to remember, that there's a problem. What is that problem? The problem is fiat currency in our monetary system. And, gold for a long time was sort of the answer to that. But in an internet age where TCP/IP rules everything, gold really doesn't work as a...
See, I'm not familiar with TCP/IP. Like, should I be familiar with it?
No, not really. It's just a protocol that is the basis for a lot of internet traffic.
Okay.
Right? Transfer control protocol, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Anyways.
So what you're saying, there's a context that Bitcoin comes about in.
Yeah.
And now we have it. So...
like in response to a very real problem.
Yeah.
This is a solution. That's why the white paper was written.
Yeah.
So it's not just...
what's interesting about it is, okay, it's a solution and it's put out there, right? But it's not forced upon anybody. No. It's not like some government came up with this idea and then was like, all right, people, now everyone in this territory, you have to use this thing that we just invented because in response to all the fiat money that's going on, like, we want you to use this. It was kind of like, well, if this could work, right? Like, here's my solution to whatever. And like, if this could work, then why don't you try it and adopt it? And I think that's the path of monetization for Bitcoin that we're on right now.
Well, that it being voluntary is like super important, because what other currency do we have that is not voluntary? Right now. Like, you can say there's gold. Gold or silver, right? People
I'll
don't
volunteer
really
to take your
much.
dollars if you want.
No, but I mean, the Canadian dollar is mandated by the Canadian government. That's why it's the Canadian dollar.
Right. You have to pay taxes.
Yeah, in Canadian dollars, and that's the issue of taxation is where they create that demand really for the dollar, whether it's U.S. dollar, Canadian dollar, whatever your currency is, right? Central bank digital currencies, again, they're being mandated, by governments. Yeah. Whereas Bitcoin is entirely voluntary. So it's just like...
no one's forcing anity to use it.
Yeah, completely
So we're not forcing anybody to use it either. We're just talking about how it exists and how it's interesting.
Well, I mean, that is important. We kind of do the disclaimers once in a while, right?
Yeah.
That this is for entertainment, or, these are our opinions. But really, if you're going to go down this rabbit hole, you need to do your own research. And that's sort of part of the culture of Bitcoin as well.
Yeah.
Where it's not like just blindly trust. It's like, no, you have agency here, and you need to...
What do you mean by agency? Like...
well, you are your own agent.
Yeah, you're responsible for
you have
your own
responsibility.
Decisions.
Yeah, you can make decisions. You have that capacity, but you also have responsibility to make the right decisions and to do the research, and not just blindly like rush in because, hey, everybody else is doing it, or it looks really cool, or whatever, right? That's not the right approach.
Yeah.
to something like this, and certainly not to Bitcoin. So
Yeah.
but yeah, it is voluntary, and it's not foisted upon us by anybody else. And that's like, what other currency or money can you think of that we have right now?
Yeah, because I would think, like, going back far enough, gold would be a good example. Maybe countries would, collect taxes in gold.
Yep.
Or, levies on other nations or whatever in gold, like pay tribute to the king in gold. So in a certain sense, yeah, it is imposed, but it probably came about before that.
It was imposed, but it was also a general consensus.
Yeah.
Right? The fact that it was across nations. So you could say, like, well, that's the US dollar. And to a certain extent, you'd probably be right that almost anywhere you go, you can pay with the US dollar.
Yeah. Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're moving away from that.
Yeah.
Not moving away, but there are some fractures in that system.
Yeah.
Where, you see more and more transactions in Chinese yuan or Russian rubles.
Yeah. So,
But,
okay, there's two ways. Maybe I mentioned this before, but there's two ways to kind of look at Bitcoin, I think. And one is like this technical way. Yeah. And then one is like this economic way, right?
Yeah.
So on this podcast, like, I think we're more coming from the economic side of things, right? We were talking about money and what is the value, like how does it store your time over whatever, right? But there's the technical side of it, which if you read the white paper, what Bitcoin is and when it was invented, like there's a lot of math in here. There's a lot of diagrams pointing like, okay, how does this actually work? It's quite a technical thing, right?
Yeah.
So for the average person to just, okay, hey guys, what's Bitcoin? It's like, well, technically, like you can get pretty technical, right? You can read this document and go in as much detail as you want, and you can start doing computer code, try and figure it out, right?
Yeah.
So, but that side, if you look at the technical side of things only, I think that's where it's a little bit short-sighted, right? Because, like you said, this was a technical solution or an invention, but it was in the context of an economic system, an economic problem that persisted in the world, right? To this day. So, because I do know folks that I've talked to in the past who, like Bitcoin, it has this technical issue. Like, why can't we scale it? Why can't we do this with it? Why can't we do that? Right? Like, look at these other cryptocurrencies that have come out since, where the inventors of those cryptocurrencies have looked at the Bitcoin white paper and said, oh yeah, you know what, we can make massive improvements on this, like for efficiency or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And we can find specific use cases that are better and more scalable. So why don't we implement that currency instead, right? You have like Ethereum and you have all these other cryptocurrencies, right? So from a strictly technical point of view, some of these other ones might have interesting technological advancements or changes or whatever, or use cases or I don't know. But when you look at Bitcoin, I think it's important to realize like this was an invention in an economic system that was flawed, with the intention that the monetary properties of this software would be the most important thing, right? And the fact that we can rely on that. Does that make sense or go over anybody's?
No, it's it depends how far in down the rabbit hole of Bitcoin you are, but but you're right.
But I'm just these two perspectives, right? Like if you just look at it as technology, well, maybe it's inferior, right? But if you take away the economic layer, then it maybe doesn't have as much significance. Like I wouldn't really care about Bitcoin if I didn't know that the monetary system was broken.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but it's precisely as a response to that broken system
that it came about.
That the technical aspects of it were developed. And we'll probably get into these in other episodes, but a lot of the perceived weaknesses or shortcomings of Bitcoin are actually strengths. And it was, I think there was a lot of thought that went into this, where you're like, oh, we can do this better, we can do that better, but there's always shortfalls with that, right? And so, probably we're not going to get into those.
We could
now.
Our notes are pretty scrambly. So,
well, I want to just quickly get back to the idea of Bitcoin as an investment.
Okay.
Before we go get super technical, right? So I think we've kind of, been leaning towards like it's not an investment.
Yeah.
right? So there was that article
I agree
we
with
looked
you,
at
Mark.
in the Reformed Perspective, a publication, where basically the author wrote against investing in Bitcoin. And initially it's like, hey, what are you
can't
talking
invest
about?
in cryptocurrency.
Yeah, you can't invest in cryptocurrencies. And, first of all, Bitcoin is not a cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is Bitcoin. And then cryptocurrencies came and coalesced around the idea of Bitcoin afterwards. But it's, let's make that distinction, right? It is not a cryptocurrency. Second of all, it's, the gist of that article, I think, was correct. It's not an investment, right? The fact that the value keeps rising is an offshoot of its technical merit, and the problem that it solves in the world.
And
but
more people seeing that and adopting it, putting their value in it, and the price goes up.
Yeah. And so, did the author of that white paper foresee this price action? I don't, maybe to an extent, but I don't think he maybe understood the full ramifications of like what it would be. But the point is, it's a simple system that works well for transacting.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the idea of the whole idea of it. And the fact that people are assigning monetary value to each piece of that puzzle now, like that's sort of a side effect. So we talked about investing, right? What is investing? You're looking for profit. You're looking for gain. So you're taking what you have and you're doing more with it. Yeah. And that's really not, I don't think, the right attitude towards Bitcoin, right? People write about like tulip mania, the tulip bubble, the this bubble, the that bubble, the Bitcoin bubble, right? And certainly people get involved in Bitcoin. A lot of people, the first interaction, like mine, certainly was like, wow, look at this, the price just keeps going up, right? We should get some.
Yeah.
And, that's that initial worm that's dangling in front of you. But that's not really the value of it.
Yeah.
So
we should get some, as in we want free money, right? Like everyone wants something quick and easy, get it rich quick kind of.
So, I mean, if I think about real estate, which, we're in.
Do you ever not think about real estate?
Yeah, when I'm thinking about Bitcoin.
Okay.
But, you can invest in real estate.
Yeah.
But generally, if you're a prudent investor and you kind of have your priorities straight, you're not looking for massive gain.
Yeah.
Because again, these bubbles, and we've seen some massive gains that have happened, and people who did really well and people who did very poorly bought at the top and are now suffering for that. But the prudent investor who's been in real estate for a long time, like sometimes you have these big gains.
Yeah.
That happens. That's not the game plan.
Yeah.
And if it happens, great. But even let's say you've held real estate for the last 10 years, you're not really benefiting necessarily from those huge COVID gains because a lot of those have leveled off again.
Yeah.
And if you were to look at, if you just looked at sort of the rate of appreciation of real estate in the last 10 years, like it's actually been not normal because of monetary policy, as we've discussed. But if you sort of look at, the COVID bubble, we're probably still in that same trajectory.
Yeah.
Once you adjust for the up and the down of COVID pricing. So
yeah. Well, so I have people come to me to just chat about real estate, and they got some money kicking around. They want to invest in real estate, or they want to use their money wisely, right? So we always kind of take a step back. It's like, well, do you have a business, right? Because there's lots of different ways to put your money to work, right? And business is probably, like, if you have a business that can earn great returns, and if you put $1 million in your business and you can make it $10 million in 2 years, like that, you can't compare that, right? But that's also an active business. Like generally, there's people working there full time trying to make this thing work, unless you just own the business and you're outside of it. But real estate's kind of the next step down, where like it's kind of a business in a box, but it's a pretty simplified one. And the play is more, you're buying an asset that's going up in value because it's valued in dollars that are depreciating, and it's not depreciating the same. Like in fact, it's getting more scarce kind of thing. Because
there's the intrinsic value, the utility value, but then layered on top of that is the monetary debasement.
But to bring that back to Bitcoin, like with Bitcoin, these same people ask me, well, why would I buy Bitcoin? It's like, well, or why would I invest in Bitcoin? It's like, well, you're not really investing in Bitcoin the same way you would take $1 million and put it into your business, or take, a couple $100,000 and buy a house.
Yeah.
What Bitcoin is a different type of thing. It's actually money. So what you currently are using and investing is Canadian dollars or whatever, and you're like that's not really the money, right? So you're kind of playing this game. Yeah, you made lots of money in your business, or your real estate is generating returns, but it's all denominated in Canadian dollars, which is a continually debasing system.
Yeah.
So at some point you're going to have savings or extra, right? And that extra, I think to use it prudently is good to consider what other sound monies are out there. And that's how I look at Bitcoin. I look at, okay, this monetary technology is currently monetizing. And if I can buy some of that and know that, I can send the value to Mark instantaneously. Not that I ever would. But
Good.
it's peer-to-peer, right? So
yeah.
I'm never going to try it. Right? Like but it's not an investment. So when you buy it, you're not expecting that it's going to earn this big return, or
well,
it maybe will in relative to the dollar.
Yeah, and I think
right?
that's
and other goods that are denominated in the dollar.
That's the sad.
But the expectation
reality.
or the mindset when I approach this is a store of value. It is money. I hold it so that I know in 40 years this will have the same purchasing power, if not more, right? And I'm not going to be debased into oblivion like if I held the same amount in Canadian dollars.
And I think that is a real important distinction. It's not buying it because it could go, it could double tomorrow. Like it could.
Yeah.
It could also drop, but over the long term. But it's the same.
Well, just since we started talking, it dropped $1,000.
No, but it's the same thing with real estate, right? Like we said,
Maybe
there's two values.
Like, hey.
Maybe.
Yeah.
You have the utility value, and then the aspect where it is a hedge against monetary debasement. And if you have a good house, it should have debasement as well.
Yeah.
So it can be
in
duplex.
Canada.
Yeah, in Canada.
You want a good debasement with a good ceiling height.
But that's the same sort of value that Bitcoin holds, right?
Right.
Is that hedge against monetary debasement, so that if you have savings, holding it in Canadian or U.S. dollars, they're going to drop.
Yeah. Is this making any sense, Skid?
Yeah. How would there be utility in Bitcoin if you never plan on using it, though?
Oh.
Well, yeah. So here's. So
you gotta repeat Gideon's question.
Yeah, what was the question?
How is there
value?
Real estate and Bitcoin both have utility. But how is there utility in Bitcoin if you never plan on
Well, so no,
I got an answer.
Yeah,
to that
there's utility value for both. There is utility value for Bitcoin. Do we want to beat the debasement thing a little bit more?
Well, the basement's pretty far down already, so we should.
We're pretty far down. Okay, so number one, it's a hedge against monetary debasement. So I would argue if you have cash, don't hold it in dollars, hold it in Bitcoin, unless it's something that you
I think
need
he's talking about
in the next 2 weeks. But the utility value is something entirely else, which in Canada we don't really, or in North America we may not see it as much.
Yeah.
Right? Because I can e-transfer you, I can give you cash, I have options, right? Those options are maybe shrinking a little bit now.
They want to get rid of cash pretty quick.
See other countries where currency, like, me sending you money or taking money out of a country is severely limited, and Bitcoin solves that. Because if you hold Bitcoin, you can send it anywhere in the world almost instantly.
Yeah. So...
But that's not something we're really familiar with in our context.
Yeah, there's not many vendors that take Bitcoin and whatever. So when I think about this, I think so Bitcoin is money, and we've looked at all the different historical monies, and we've kind of determined that money is naturally emergent. So and we just talked about that off the top of the show too, right? Like this guy put this paper out there, he didn't force anybody to use it, just kind of like people started buying some for fun, right? And then they're like, oh, this is kind of interesting, and then they buy more, and then eventually, so money or monetary technologies if you look at them, they seem to go through this like pattern of monetization, right? Before they actually become money that has like this utilitarian, like, hey, I can transact with it.
Yeah.
You got to start over here, right? Unless you're just a government coming in and forcing everybody to use it. And right away it's like, okay, this is now your savings. It's now your medium of exchange that you're going to use at the grocery store. And by the way, everything's going to be priced in these units that we said.
Yeah.
Like, okay, most like money doesn't really do that, right? Fiat money, government decree money does.
Yeah, since central banking, we've had that.
Yeah, but I would argue that like Bitcoin it exhibits superior qualities of money,
Yep.
and it is on its path of monetization. So, and that path has, I think, 4 buckets. So you talk about being first a collectible, right? And then a store of value, and then a medium of exchange, and then a unit of account.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's how it goes.
Yeah.
So like at the beginning, Bitcoin comes out, a few kind of crazy dudes on the internet are like, oh, let's collect some of these things, right? You could buy 1,000 Bitcoins for pizza. I don't know, whatever. You can start collecting them because it's interesting or cool, or that's how it kind of starts, right?
Yeah.
And then it's a thing, it gets on the news, and then people start using it to store value. So like people like you and I come in, and we're maybe not the most tech savvy people. We're just, I have a few extra Canadian dollars. I like to own Bitcoin just to kind of store value, and I don't expect to transact in it. I don't expect to go to the store and see like, the products I want to buy priced in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's a little ways down. So we're kind of in this phase of, we moved from collectible to store of value. And now we're starting to see the world kind of interact with Bitcoin in a more serious way as more value goes into it, right? So as the market cap gets bigger,
yeah,
like how much money is actually stored in this Bitcoin vehicle. And then you talk about like having ETFs like regulated, and like them starting to basically allow bigger investors to put bigger amounts of money in.
Yeah.
So once you get to a certain threshold where everybody has, let's say, like 1% of their money in, and then 2% of them, like what if a whole world had 50% or like 10%, whatever, right? Like where's that threshold where it goes from being a store of value to, well, okay, if I have all my cash balances in Bitcoin and you have all your cash balances in Bitcoin, right? Like if, let's say I had $1,000 in Bitcoin and you had $1,000 in Bitcoin, well, you can do quite a few transactions with $1,000.
Yeah.
Right. So even if $1,000 is like, 1% of your net worth or something, like you can now interact with everyone else who has 1% of their net worth or whatever. Right. So then it becomes this medium exchange where, okay, everybody's really transacting with it. It's useful. It's peer-to-peer. I can send value around. And then it kind of becomes this unit of account where you start thinking in Bitcoin. You're like, hey, that pair of socks is actually this many Bitcoins, right?
Yeah.
And like that car is that many Bitcoins. Because right now we're thinking in dollars.
Yeah, it's all in dollars.
And you might think in US dollars if you think about some things. You think in Canadian dollars. Like people from other countries would think in their currency, and then maybe they would also think in US dollars. Right. So everybody's unit of account is kind of forced upon them by the currency of the country they live in. And that kind of governs. But that can be changed, right? If more and more people just willingly adopt it over time, which is what happens to money, right? Like we talked about, just naturally emergent, it just happens. It's like, well, I see more value in holding something that's scarce than something that they can print. That's
Yeah.
Does that answer your question? Okay.
Well, and the Bitcoin would only keep going up in value, we'd say, as people lose faith in our monetary system, as our existing currency gets debased, right? That's why the price of Bitcoin keeps going up.
Right, because all the goods and services in the economy are valued right now in a currency that is slowly or quickly losing value.
Yeah.
So all the prices are going up.
Yeah, if there wasn't a problem, Bitcoin would not keep growing.
Yeah.
Like the price wouldn't keep going up.
Yeah, because no one would buy more of it.
Yeah.
But the price essentially goes up. Like when you talk about the price, it's kind of a tricky thing, right? Because now you're comparing the price of Bitcoin, but the price is a measurement of
we're still
Bitcoin's
looking at
value
it from
in
dollars.
dollar terms.
We're not looking at it from from
now
the Bitcoin
we're getting
perspective.
complex.
Yeah, but I mean everything else in our lives is valued in dollars
right now. Yeah.
like monetarily speaking, right? So that's until you live entirely in a Bitcoin ecosystem, you're not going to make that switch. So you're always going to look at it from a dollar value, right?
Yeah.
So
man.
so yeah, is it an investment? I mean, there's a long way around to say, like, it's not a traditional investment, like I'm going to put my money here with the hope of gain.
A return, yeah.
Because most Bitcoiners don't have everything they own in Bitcoin, right? There may be some people, like you said, who live in entirely a Bitcoin ecosystem, where they live somewhere where they can completely transact in Bitcoin. So then maybe they have everything in that. And that's fine. But for most people, that's not practical. For most people who are into Bitcoin, they still have jobs or businesses that they earn Canadian or US or whatever dollars from. Their sources of income are in dollars still, right? We still have real estate. We're investing in real estate, and that's all denominated in dollars. Eventually, at some point, it may be Bitcoin.
Yeah,
but
and I think
don't
that
think in our
point,
lifetime.
when you say at some point, I think that point has to be once there's a large number of people who have a large enough percentage of their cash balances or their savings in Bitcoin, right?
Well, and yeah, I mean, the sad reality is our system needs to keep getting worse in order for that to happen.
Yeah, which is kind of on the right track. If that's the assumption we're making, I don't know. Like,
is,
you just
but
read the
it's
news
sad,
every day.
right?
It's like, well, is this getting better or worse?
Yeah, that's the only way that we get to a point where everybody uses Bitcoin. And, will that happen? When will that happen? Is it our lifetime? I doubt it. But I think that's an important thing to realize, is that it's not like part of it. Yeah, we think Bitcoin is great and it's super good and everybody should use it. But the reason it's going to win, if it does, or become a widely accepted currency, is only because the current system is so bad and is failing.
Yeah.
And it's not failing because of Bitcoin or because of, this exogenous threat to the system. It's only because the system is crumbling, and it's such a bad system that it eats itself, and it's going to destroy itself. And we've
just made me think about politics. I'm like, okay, well, most people in politics are just focusing on, how am I going to make the other guy look bad? We're just talking, okay, how can we make the financial system look bad enough that people
sometimes in politics, all you have to do is just not say anything and let the other guy destroy them. I can't think of any, current examples where that might happen, but you don't even need to say anything. You just let the other people talk, and they completely destroy themselves. But that's kind of the system we have right now. And a lot of countries have gone through this, where it's been, destruction of the middle class and destruction of savings, and there was no alternative.
Yeah.
Right? It was just like, well, this is and we've talked about countries where this has happened. There was no alternative, but now there is an alternative.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as far as the investment goes.
Well, I still think that there is better ways to use your money, because if Bitcoin is money and you have money, that's great. But I think, maybe let me just say, there's better ways to use your money if you're prepared to take the risk and the time, right? Like, you can make a good investment. So even in a world where Bitcoin exists, it exists right now, but a Bitcoin world where everybody kind of uses it, right? You would be less incentivized to spend it, because holding your money means it's worth more tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Unlike what we currently have, right? We're kind of incentivized to spend it. So you'd be incentivized to save, and less incentivized to invest, because investing means you're taking all your savings that are going to be worth more tomorrow, and you're going to put it into something that, like real estate, for example. Like, why would I buy that house if I don't know if it's going to go up in value or what? Like, right? There's that risk.
It really changes your outlook. Yeah.
But I still think that investing will happen, and investing's a good thing. Not necessarily real estate investing, but like businesses, right? Productive ways to use wealth or capital or value that we've stored, and to put it to work towards improving the lives of other people, adding value, right, to people's lives, and then being able to generate a return on that money, right? And it's going to take time, it's going to take risk, it's going to take skill, right? Dedication, commitment over long term. But I think that's probably a more useful way of putting your money to work than just holding Bitcoin.
And that's really what we want. We want a system where you can store the value of your labor.
And it's not for everybody, right? Not everybody's just going to start a business and like put their money to work or even invest in a business, right?
No, but what, like in our system now, if you're one of those people, generally you're falling behind unless you're like a high income earner, which again is not everybody.
Yeah.
But in the system we have now, it doesn't really allow for that, right? Because we've seen inflation eating away at everybody's purchasing power. Everybody in Canada, you know, with a few exceptions, is more poor than they were 10 years ago by any measure.
Yeah.
Whether it's buying housing, whether it's buying groceries, their purchasing power has declined.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not right. It's a corrupt system. And we're not.
We need to get you a sign and you're going to pick it out front. It's just not right, folks.
Well, no, I just really want to hammer the point that Bitcoin is the answer to a problem. And I wish we didn't have that problem. I wish we didn't need Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right? Even real estate.
Yeah, real estate is
We've
kind of
talked about this before.
Why would I buy a house?
Here?
I don't need a house. Like you need a house.
Yeah, I have one. I don't need another one.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, the only way to, either get ahead or at least hedge against this problem that we have is to buy real estate. That's why so many people have done it.
Yeah.
And have been successful.
Oh.
So just,
One more rant.
Gets me a little,
what else we got on our notes here, Mark?
Oh, where do you want to? Okay, so
you had the question here. Should you put all your money into Bitcoin? That's financial advice, no?
Well, so you have
that.
Well, you have what we call Bitcoin maxis, right? Ooh. Maximalists.
Okay, so what is that?
And we may be offending some of them with this podcast or what we're talking about. I don't really care, but
you should, because they're maximalists. They're going to come burn our studio down.
They could. They could.
Good thing we're decentralized. We can just unplug our USB.
Everything is Bitcoin, and everything has to be like, you shouldn't have money in anything else because it's just stupid, and it's this corrupt system we talked about. Yes. And like everything is like, that's not the answer, right? Bitcoin is the solution to a problem. It's not a god. It's not something, now you're almost like making Bitcoin mammon.
Yeah.
And you're worshiping it, right? We should use money for good.
Yeah.
We should use it to praise God. We should be good stewards.
Well, again, when you say steward, it's a gift to us too, right? It's not ours.
Yeah.
Like even when you're kind of hoarding or storing, or what do they call it? Hodling, right? Holding Bitcoin for the long term. That's kind of like this thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not yours. Like that's as Christians, what we believe, right? It's not, everything that we have is a gift from God, right? And we're stewarding it. Like it's under our control. Yes. But technically God's gift to us.
Yeah. There's an interesting, we should talk about that too. Interesting subculture of Bitcoin. Right, this very strong libertarian bent and this very strong sovereign individual movement. But
those are two things that are very deep rabbit holes.
They are
sovereign individual.
But I think we can cover them in 5 minutes.
Okay.
So
they're not that important. They're not that important, but
no, they are. I mean, those are whole episodes on their own. But yeah, this whole idea that Bitcoin only and nothing else, like you we've talked about. Having a business, that's probably the best use of if you can do that, the best use of your time and your money, and the best stewardly use of that, whether you're denominated in dollars or Bitcoin. So, and then, real estate, I think we say is like the next best thing.
Yeah.
And the best
especially
option
in
for a lot of
system.
regular people. Yeah. Only because the current system is so lousy.
Yeah.
I think
and
having
for
your
regular
own business
people
in any system would be good.
Yeah.
Whether you're in a Bitcoin system or a gold system or whatever.
Because in a business you're actively trying to produce things of value to people. Like with real estate, your product is like housing, which is of value, but it's kind of like a passive.
There's more value than just the utility value.
But you said it's accessible for people. Like, the average person can get into it because you can qualify for debt, and it's easy to and it's pretty straightforward because there's a lot of demand for housing. And
and we talk about reaping and sowing as well, right?
Do we?
Well, I think we have.
should. Okay.
We should. Okay. If
There's
we
another
haven't, we
episode,
should.
man.
No, but just the idea of reaping and sowing. Like, I understand the reluctance that people. I think you had a quote from
Jack Handy.
not those ones.
Okay.
Bonson. I can't.
Oh.
It's not Greg. It's
David?
It's his kid, right? Who's a hedge fund manager, and I think he talked. He did. I think he put out a book. I think you have the book, right?
Yeah.
Doug Wilson.
Misinflation.
Yeah. Anyway, so there is this reluctance for Christians to engage in Bitcoin because of this idea of reaping and sowing, and you're sowing what you didn't reap. And that's never really a good thing, right? And that's with the expectations of massive gain. But if hopefully we've kind of put that to rest, that's not why you should be looking at Bitcoin. You should be looking at it in response to a broken and corrupt system.
Yeah.
Reaping versus sowing. So when you have a business, you're sowing, right?
Yeah.
You're really putting seeds or whatever in the ground, if we want to continue this allegory, right? With the hope of reaping more than what you put in.
Yeah.
Right. And in real estate, we're kind of doing the same thing, although it's because of an unjust system, right?
I'm just thinking because.
We know.
Okay, but wait. So.
Okay, I'm waiting.
Sorry, when you put a seed in the ground.
Yeah.
Is one little thing. And then God causes that to go into a plant, into grain, and have an abundance of seeds.
Yes.
So then those are the sowing. Like you're not sowing what you, those are what you're reaping, right? So you're not reaping what you sowed. You're reaping abundance, or like, tenfold what you sowed, right?
Yeah.
So that's the productivity, right? You're putting something in the ground, you're getting more out.
Yeah, and that's, in a business, generally that's useful, depending on the business. But let's say you're employing people, right? It's good all around for everybody.
Yeah.
And then, you deserve to reap, to get those rewards, with the understanding, again, it's not yours.
Yeah.
But God allows you to hold on.
But I was thinking in terms of real estate, like, okay, but the sowing and the reaping analogy, like if I sow in real estate, like I have a house, but from day one, it's deteriorating. It's going down in value. Like the tenants move in there, the things start falling apart, right? Like, so in 20 years, 30 years, it's not going to be like a grain that I planted in the ground and now there's 10 of them, right? Like it's not going to be 10 houses or 10 units, or it's just going to be the same thing, but in less, not as good shape.
but in terms of the monetary value,
yeah.
Right? So I think it's a good thing if you have a property, well, you have to maintain that. That's good. You're putting work into it. You're doing honest work.
Yeah.
And, that should maintain its value and provide housing for somebody over the long term. So that's good. And you can make some money from that. But really what we're seeing with debasement is we're kind of in real estate reaping what we didn't sow.
Yeah.
Right. When you see these ridiculous values of house prices going up.
Yeah.
That's
just wealth stolen from the nation. Right?
Essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? We didn't do anything.
Are thieves.
Well, I mean, that's maybe a strong way to put
Strategic thieves.
Strategic thieves.
Oh, no,
but that's the whole point of real estate is you're taking advantage of this system.
Yeah.
And so some people will argue, and there's maybe an argument for that's not, like, you shouldn't do that because you're participating in a corrupt system.
Yeah.
And then,
it's like, how can you not?
That's exactly my point. How can you not participate? Because everything we do is corrupt.
Yeah.
And, maybe we'll have a different system one day, but that it's sort of a similar idea, the reaping versus sowing, right? In real estate, you're not reaping what you sowed.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And that's just how it is. And eventually maybe one day it won't be like that, but, you need to do that because if you're just working a minimum wage job, let's say, like
in the current system,
you will never reap more than you sow, and you will probably reap less than you sow.
That's kind of frustrating because that's what we talked about with Robert Kiyosaki. We got to have him on, eh? Robert? Yeah. We'll
Gideon, can you get Robert Kiyosaki on the phone?
Yeah. Let's go. Where is he? He's late. But no, his whole mindset is, you know what? Go to school, get a good job, get good grades, right? Get a good pension. That's the system that we grew up with, that we were taught. And if you follow that and you abide by what you're taught and you do all the right things, the system itself does not reward you. And it's kind of saddening, right? Or saddening and maddening. And for the average person, just like coming out of school, getting a job, working hard, find a place to rent, and then going, I'm never getting ahead. It's like, no, you're not, right? And to say that to people is kind of like, well, sorry, but also like, whose fault is this? And I think that's the kind of the point of our podcast, is to like shine a light on the fact that, yeah, if you wake up in the morning and you go to work and you have no investments and and you store all your money in like Canadian dollars, right?
Pizza and video games.
Well, whatever it is, right? Even if you work hard and you spend all of your waking hours trying to diligently work, like, you're going to save money. But if you save that money in a currency that's devaluing constantly, like, you're never getting ahead. And I think that loops in with the stewardship aspect, right? Like, as a steward, we have this calling to use our time and talents wisely. And I think if you understand that the system is what it is, and you understand that you're going to spend a lot of your life working, well, why don't we find a way that we can productively use the fruit or what you've reaped from your labor in a way that doesn't devalue, so that in 20 years, you can be a bigger blessing to other people, and you can help, those who maybe are just starting out or haven't got this yet, right? So, I mean, all of our listener out there.
No, I think there's two, so you can say listeners.
Okay. Oh, man. That's my little rant.
Okay. Well, we both had some.
It has nothing to do with Bitcoin.
Both had
This
some
whole
time for
podcast is
rants
supposed to
there.
be about Bitcoin. So,
well, it is because we see the problem,
yeah.
right? And we're living in a world with, again, a corrupt money system. And like, what do you do in response to that, right? So that's where Bitcoin comes in.
Yeah. You wrote something on your paper, and I'm really curious, because usually when I say things, nobody takes notes.
Sorry.
He's like crossing things off, like, oh.
No, that was a thought in my own head. It was nothing you said, Brent.
Okay.
Sorry to burst your bubble.
Oh, man.
Note for a future episode. Okay. So, I mean, have we kind of covered?
Yeah, we did point one, and part of point two.
Is Bitcoin an investment? I think that's the thing we wanted to talk about. Can you invest in Bitcoin?
I mean, we didn't go into libertarianism and Christianity and are they compatible, and
well, that's
sovereignty.
part of my note here.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. Why don't we cut it there?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, hopefully that brought some value to people. Right? Is it an investment? No, it's not an investment. We could have saved you now.
We could. Enjoy your commute to work.
Okay, well, cool. Thanks for listening, folks. And until next time,
steward your wealth wisely. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
And if you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We'll see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.